Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Justin Johnson. I am on the Open University's academic study on the module A225 Block 3 Decline and Renewal 1880 to 1940, edited by Mackie, page 142, Unit 18, Urbanisation, Degeneration and Understandings of the Big City. It's a very good idea to broaden your horizon, getting your mind occupied, make sacrifices, trying to eliminate bad influence around your well-being, your vitality. The living waters is keeping your mind busy, preoccupied, rather than getting yourself involved in other people's life indulgences and bad circles, bad custom. Anyway, it's good to keep busy, keep the mind active. At the beginning, this extract reads much like some of the other accounts of the East End that appeared early in this section. Steed suggests that prostitution is more prevalent in this area of the city and much more natural in the West. But he also notes that child prostitution does not appear to be common. In the fashionable West End, however, Steed suggests that brothels are far more likely to admit young girls. Steed applies that one brothel on Edgware Road probably would admit young girls if it weren't for the fact it is being watched by the Vigilance Committee, a group of private individuals who took it on themselves to enforce the law. In another brothel on Wealthy Park Lane, Steed claims that girls of any age are permitted. In this sense, Steed exposes challenges the traditional distinction between the west and the east of the city, revealing that far troubling forms of vice are actually more common in the wealthier and supposedly respectable parts of the city. Reading extracts such as this, we can see why the maiden tribute caused such a public outcry. Whereas previous accounts of vice had tended to present prostitution and criminality as confined to the east of the city, Steed revealed that shocking acts of child abuse and exploitation were in fact taking place in well-to-do areas and were being perpetrated by those with wealth and in positions of power. The urban poor in Steed's account were not always the cause of criminality, but often the victims of it. Steed's revelations inflamed class tensions. Many of those who protested in Hyde Park, for example, were work class Londoners directing their anger towards the ruling classes. Steed's account also fueled concerns over immorality and prostitution and reinforced perceptions of the city as a potentially corrupting influence. 18.3 Generation and Decline. In this section, you'll focus on how the scandals of 1880s merged with new theories of psychological and the natural sciences, fueling fears that the dehumanizing nature of urban living was leading to the degeneration and decline of the nation. This section will examine how Darwin's ideas of evolution were taken up in popular and pseudo-science to express concerns about the impact of city life on human nature and the natural world. The influence of Darwin. In the mid-19th century, evolutionary theories advanced most famously, but by no means exclusively by Charles Darwin, 1809-1882, began to emerge. Darwin argued that random mutations over the course of millions of years had allowed animals and plants to adapt to their environment. Mutations that were beneficial helped certain plants and animals to survive and pass on their traits to future generations. Competition with the natural world meant that those species that were not so well adapted died out. As a consequence, plants and animals gradually evolved. This theory of natural selection, as Darwin termed it, was highly influential, and by the 1880s, various evolutionary theories and models had become widespread, as you have discovered in this unit. A mighty empire and a restless society, United Kingdom in the 1880s, Unit 18, Darwinian metaphors were also often applied to a range of political, economic, and social issues. Another influential theorist was the sociologist Herbert Spencer, 1820 to 1903, who in the 1850s began to apply theories of natural selection and evolution to human groups. Rather than botany and zoology, as Darwin did. Unlike Darwin, Spencer believed that evolution occurred not as a result of random mutation, but rather as a consequence of individuals adapting to their social environment, whereas change in Darwin's eyes occurred very slowly. Spencer emphasized these developments unfolding at a far greater pace. Indeed, Spencer believed that the society was always changing and that it was subject to the same laws of competition as the natural world. Whereas some human societies were surviving and thriving, others were decaying, and it was this fear that drove many ideas of degeneration, while Darwin's theories are now broadly accepted within the scientific community. However, Spencer have since been disproven. Theories of degeneration. How then did these theories influence the anxieties surrounding urbanisation during the 1980s? Many thinkers become increasingly concerned about the impact of urban environment on the moral and physical health of those who lived in it. As the historian Gareth Stephen Jones 2013 has shown, there are particular concerns in London about residuum of underclass of city dwellers and those who survived on casual labour or through criminality, lived in extreme poverty and weren't seen to be prone to idleness and alcoholism in this sense. The residuum differed from the working class, which, although often poor, was seen to be dwelling and capable of holding down regular employment. Due to the conditions in which people from the residuum lived, they were all often malnourished and unfit. But many social theorists observed that, despite theories of natural selection, this group had not died out, rather due to improvements in sanitisation and medicine that you read about in U13. It appeared that the urban poor were now surviving for longer and were able to procreate in greater numbers than even before. This led to fears that they would pass on their supposed characteristics, physical and mental inferiority, susceptibility to immoral behaviour, to future generations. The biggest concern, however, was due to the process of urbanisation that you encountered in Section 18.1. As more and more supposedly healthy migrants from the countryside moved to the big cities for work, it was feared that they too would deteriorate and that successive generations of inferior city dwellers would multiply, passing on their traits, while the healthier stock of rural dwellers was eroded. As a consequence, it was feared that the physical, mental, and moral health of the entire nation and its empire would decline. The belief that the rigours of the urban environment could lead to mental or physical deterioration, and the fear that these traits could then be transmitted to subsequent generations, influenced attitudes to a range of issues during the period 1880-1940s. Fears of degeneration were enforced in the Second Anglo-Boer War 1899 to 1902. For instance, when army medical examination revealed the poor physical condition of potential recruits for the urban slums. You'll learn more about the war itself in the unit Britain, Empire and Imperialism, 1880-1914, Unit 20. Estimates in 1901 suggested that nearly 6% of potential recruits have been rejected on the grounds of their health or physique. Soloway, 1995, in the wake of these revelations, Charles Masterman described a distinct physical type of city dweller: stunted, narrow-chested, easily wearied, yet voluble, excitable, with little ballast, stamina or endurance, seeking stimulus in a drink. Masterman, 1901. Statistics show that the poor classes were certainly physically smaller than wealthier Britons during this period. Although this was by no means a new phenomenon, between 1880 and 1910, 13-year-old working class boys in London and Glasgow were on average 2.5 inches, 6.25 centimetres, shorter than those on middle incomes, and 4 inches, 10 centimetres shorter than those from the upper classes, Perkin 2002. Notions of degeneration all shaped attitudes to crime. In Italy, the criminologist Cesare Lombroso, 1835 to 1909, argued that habitual criminals criminals were in fact biologically distinct from law-abiding members of society, although the British criminologist Charles Gore in 1870-1919 refuted this view in the English Convict 1913. Even he believed that there was a physical, mental, and moral type of normal person who tends to be convicted of crime. On the average, the criminal of English prisons is markedly differentiated by defective physique, as measured by stature and body weight, by defective mental capacity, as measured by general intelligence, and by an increased possession of willful antisocial proclivities, as measured apart from intelligence by length of sentence to imprisonment. Henry Maudsley, extract from the Body and Will, 1883, located in the unit. Maudsley, 1835 to 1918, was an influential psychiatrist, a prolific writer who advanced theories of degeneration. After you had read this extract, consider the following questions. To what extent is Maudsley influenced by Darwin's theories of evolution? How does Maudsley use Darwin's theory of natural selection to explain the theory of degeneration? And how might these ideas have fueled the anxieties surrounding urbanisation? While Maudsley acknowledges Darwin's theories of evolution, he does not believe that all organisms are evolving to a higher state. Rather, he argues that while some are evolving, others are in fact degenerating. He describes Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest, but argues that this process does not necessarily result in a more advanced organism. Instead, Maudsley believes that the nature of the environment to which the organism adapts will determine whether it evolves or degenerates, rather than bringing out admirable qualities. The environment may, in fact, encourage the development of negative traits. While Maudsley does not specifically refer to city living here, he implies that certain environments may foster the development of savage or roguish qualities in humans, given the existing anxieties regarding urbanisation. Maudsley may well have had the city in mind. The urban environment, for example, might foster immoral traits in humans because a life of crime was what allowed individuals to prosper in this unforgiving setting. Maudsley's work is just one example of how Darwin's theories began to be applied to social problems, although Darwin himself did not apply his ideas to sociology. This development of social Darwinism was a major feature of intellectual thought during the period 1880 to 1914. Darwin himself, however, would not necessarily have agreed with arguments such as Maudsley. Now, where did he explicitly advance theories of degeneration? Solutions to the problems of degeneration. Fears of degeneration forced Victorian and Edwardian thinkers to propose a range of solutions. Social imperialists, for instance, advocated the creation of colonies, both in Britain and abroad, become home to those living in extreme poverty. William Booth, as you have seen, proposed a similar solution in The Darkest England and The Way Out. The new colonies would remove the residuum from the degenerative effects of urban environment, provided people with meaningful work, allow them to be civilized, and prevent them from contaminating their neighbours. Figures such as Booth and Steed believed that a state-sponsored emigration programme, which would move the very poorest members of society to the new colonies throughout the British Empire, would elevate the problems of overcrowding and poverty at home, thus helping to reverse the degenerated impact of the urban environment. A similar scheme as you discovered in Unit 9 was introduced to assist the survivors of the Irish famine. However, although the scheme gained support from novelist Henry Rider Haggard, 1856 to 1952, who had been commissioned by the Colonial Secretary to investigate it in 1905. The government never actually officially endorsed the idea of state-sponsored emigration. You will learn more about the immigration from Britain to parts of the British Empire in Unit 20. Theories of urban degeneration also inspired the rise of eugenics movement in the 1880s. The terms eugenics was coined in 1883 by the scientist Francis Galton, 1822 to 1911, who believed that it would be possible to improve the health and ability of the nation through careful breeding. By encouraging those who were fit and healthy to pass on their genes, and by discouraging or preventing others from having children, Galton believed that the deterioration of the nation could be avoided. In doing so, eugenics, eugenicists such as Galton suggest that human characteristics were predominantly the product of hereditary transmission rather than a consequence of environmental factors. Eugenists such as Galton were concerned that the birth rate in Britain was declining from 1880s onwards. It became apparent that this was primarily due to the middle and upper class reducing the size of the families, which in the eyes of the eugenists would serve only to reduce the perceived quality of British people even further, particularly if the poorest class continued to have more children. For this reason, eugenics movement began especially to focus its attention on encouraging the upper class to marry earlier and have larger families. However, despite the belief in the importance of this form of positive eugenics, Galton come to believe that birth control and specific efforts to curb the birth rate of the unfit would also be necessary. For most eugenists, therefore, issues of class were paramount. They agreed that the lowest class should be discouraged from breeding, while the upper class should be encouraged to have more children. And yet, as Dan Stone has argued, historians have often overlooked the fact that race was also a concern for many eugenicists. Stone 2002, Cole Pearson 1857-1936, and Margaret Mole, for instance, were concerned by the influx of Jewish immigrants and the effects that this might have on the British gene pool. Conducting research in London East End, they concluded that this alien Jewish population is somewhat inferior physically and mentally than the native population, which is quoted in Stone 2002. Therefore, controls on immigration and the prevention of miscegenation, the interbreeding of people from different racial groups, were also major aims for many eugenicists. The neo-Malthusian movement offered another solution to perceived problems of urban poverty and degeneration, as he discovered in Block 1. Thomas Malthus, 1764-1834, had argued in the late 19th century that population rise would have negative consequence if they exceed the level of available substance. In the late 19th century, Malthus' ideas were taken up again as an explanation for the problem of urban poverty. The solution for neo-Malthusians was to encourage birth control in order to reduce the birth rate among the entire population, but especially among the urban area. The first birth control organisation, the Malthusian League, was formed in 1877 to further this aim. In many respects, the neo-Malthusians shared some common goals with the eugenicist movement, but not all eugenicists believed that neo-Malthusian teachings were effective. Indeed, the problem for many eugenicists was not so much the size of population, but rather its mental and physical qualities. Cole Pearson, for example, observed that neo-Malthusians have by teaching lowered the birth rate, but all the evidence I can collect seems to show that this lowering of the birth rate is at the expense of the national figure, for it has taken place among the physical and mental fitter. Francis Galton extract from The Possible Improvement of Human Breed, located at Indian Unit. This compromises two extracts from one of Galton's lectures on the eugenics given in 1901. Have you read this? Consider the following question. What does Galton suggest should be done about the persistence of the criminal underclass? What is more important than this for Galton, and what methods does he purpose for improving the race of the nation? In what ways do Galton's ideas complement those of neo-Malthusians? In what ways do his views conflict with theirs? Galton suggests that habitual criminals should be segregated from the rest of the population and prevented from having children. He argues that at the same time, priority should be given to encouraging upper classes to have more children. This, he stresses, will improve the health and ability of the entire nation. The neo-Malthusian believed in reducing the birth rate among the entire population, and in this sense, they should certainly have agreed with Galton's suggestion that habitual criminals should be prevented from procreating. They would not necessarily have agreed, however, with Galton's plans to encourage higher birth rates among the upper classes. This, following Malthusian principle, might lead to unsustainable population increase. As you can see, the notion of degeneration and fears of urban underclass informed a range of scientific and pseudo-scientific approaches between 1880 and 1914. Eugenicists believed that most human traits were hereditary and therefore believed careful breeding could create a healthy and more talented nation. They felt that this would eradicate many of the problems of criminality and idleness that were associated with the urban environment. Neo-Malthusians also believed that issue of demography were at the heart of the problem, but argued the solution lay solely in curbing the birth rate. Neither group gave much consideration to the solutions, were focused on improving the urban environment itself. However, as you'll see in the following section, the social investigator Charles Booth, 1840 to 1916, while drawing on the language of degeneration, focused on environmental rather than hereditary solutions to the problems facing the urban poor.